welcome to Sonic Talk number 427, recording live today on Wednesday, the 25th of November 2015. Please say a big thank you to our sponsors, brought to you by Isotope, makers of ozone software. There'll be a competition a little bit later, and also by UVI Falcon. Creative hybrid instrument from UVI. More information on that can be found at bit.ly/ST Falcon. You can, if you're watching the YouTube version of this, the video version, you'll see the link at the bottom of the page. Otherwise, it's bit.ly/ST Falcon, all one word, lowercase. I want to thank them very much for their sponsor for the show. So, guys, we have, I want to say hello to our chat room as well. Thank you very much. A nice, fulsome one. And it's not surprising because we've only got Diego Stocco here, he's thrown an all-nighter. Well, no, he hasn't actually. He got up very early to join us this morning, and I forgot to unmute you. Diego Stocco, of course, maker of some insane physical instruments, some fantastic software instruments, works on all sorts of presets, does a lot of very amazing things with sound. How are you, Diego?
I'm good. How are you, Nick? It's good to be back.
Yeah, it's been a little while, hasn't it? You've been busy, I could see. We're going to talk a little bit about your new project later on, but it's great to have you aboard. I think last time we had you, I think you had an issue with a leaf blower, from what I recall.
Oh, yes, I moved. But, you can't really escape sounds here in Los Angeles. Actually, I read the news yesterday about this new system that allows planes to take off and land at a lower altitude around Santa Monica, and that area is very expensive. But now, basically, those residents will have a higher volume of noise from planes because of this new system.
Great.
And it's amazing if you think about it, I mean, not in a good way,
I suppose that sort of thing is likely to affect resident house prices. But I guess the thing is a man so involved in sound and the nuance of the ambience around you and recognising, the fundamental harmonics of this, that and the other, squirrels eating walnuts or whatever it may be, you must be very easily distracted when it comes to just a sort of average walk down the street.
I am, yes. It's hard to keep... it's like seeing flashes, but they just happen with sounds.
You're not. What's the thing? Is it synesthesia where you visualize audio?
Synesthesia.
Synesthesia.
I don't have synesthesia. I think I'm already a wreck with sounds as they are. I couldn't imagine being combined with visions.
Yeah, you're lucky then. I mean, if that was the case, you'd be absolutely, that would be trouble, I guess. That chuckle you heard there is Mark Tinley, who we've got with us today. Mark Tinley, marktinley.co.uk, sound artist and creative thinker. How are you, Mark?
I'm all right. I do have synesthesia, actually, but only on very loud or unexpected sounds. Which is, it's a weird thing, and I sometimes see coloured shapes in my head when I hear sounds, or if I hear really loud sounds, I get what's like a kind of a whole load of sparkles of like little white, kind of like white fairy lights behind my head, which just, it's like, oh, Jesus, what was that? But I mean, thank God I don't have it on everything. It is a weird thing.
Yeah, I can imagine that is.
And apart from that, I'm very well. Actually, well, that doesn't stop me from being well either. But there you go.
It just means. Well, I'll try and keep the plosives and the unexpected sounds down to a minimum there, so we don't have you hallucinating during the show. Never a good.
Actually, you have made me jump once already. When I first phoned in, you suddenly started playing a synth, and I was like, whoa. But I didn't see anything.
Well, I can only apologise, but while we were talking, there was an unexpected interjection there from our guest number 2, Mr. Robbie Bronneman, who's there on location where he's producing an album. Robbie, of course, is a producer, sound... what am I talking about? Composer, studio owner, all sorts of things. How are you, Robbie?
Yeah, good, thanks. Just kind of fighting off the flu this week, so hence maybe a bit of coughing and snivelling going on.
Is it man flu or proper flu?
It's been somewhere in between the two.
Oh God, I really don't want to get
Medium man flu.
Medium man flu, a heavy man cold and a medium man flu. Well, I'm sorry to hear that,
Right,
Robbie.
yeah, that's right.
I'm sorry to hear that, Robbie. All right,
Yeah.
well, I guess we could just jump straight in because I have actually prepared some topics and things to go. Before we go, just say thank you very much to our fulsome chat room, increasing by the second. So let's see if we can break any records this week. Nice to see you all in there. And of course, we'll be announcing a winner and a new competition from Isotope a bit later on. So do stay tuned. But let's have this first. This has been practically viral. It's a kind of custom piece of hardware that's designed for sampling environmental sounds and creating kind of granular... Well, I'll let him explain.
Start by recording something. Ah. This is the Collidoscope for Dr. Mix. This is the Collidoscope for Dr.
I won't play the whole thing. I mean, I'm guessing for many of you, granular synthesis and that sort of level of sample manipulation will be nothing new. I guess what is really new is this idea. I mean, it's almost like an iPad app times about 50. And I know it just it seems to have gone everywhere. I mean, all the major sort of tech news feeds have picked it up. It's got. I mean, I think this video was shot, not recently. At least if I understand it right, it's an interactive installation, collaborative musical instrument by Ben Bengler and Fiora Martin, and they made it in March 215. It's been exhibited at the Sonar D conference and Digital Design Weekend at the V&A Album Museum quite recently. Now, I'll start with you, Diego, because I mean you're not unfamiliar with macro editing of samples, I'd imagine. This looks like a lot of fun. I mean, obviously there's some questions as to why maybe it's a twos-up machine, as it were, but I think that's probably down to the fact that there's just a regular LCD monitor under it, and it makes it easier to kind of achieve rather than have a custom LCD built for what is essentially a prototype.
Yeah, but I think it's the aspect that it makes you feel like you can touch the sound, because you have the knobs and it's big. So that, I think, is the appeal of this project, because yes, granular synthesis is not new, and there are iPad apps that work in a similar way, but when you put something into the physical dimension and you expand the size, it takes a new form, and you can do things that you couldn't do, or maybe it's just the act of seeing you doing it that makes it special.
Yeah,
I like it. I like the idea. Yeah,
it reminds me a little bit of the whole concept of reactable, which is sort of something that's quite small and macro made really big, so that it's just more obvious. And that I really like. I know, Robbie, you're also very into granular. I know you're a big fan of that, and you often be seen micro tweaking with bleeding eyes on your EDM projects and production works. I mean, this looks like a lot of fun. I mean, I don't know what. Obviously, it's proprietary.
I totally agree with Diego. I mean, we've had all this kind of thing for ages, and I mean, I use it a lot with Sonic Arts Granite, which is a granular AU I use a lot. But it's the physicality of something so large, which makes it great. I think you touched on it with reactable, because I mean, when I first saw that reactable table a few years ago, wherever it was, and then Björk had it out on tour and all that, it was amazing, because it was that kind of visceral, hands-on thing. And then they brought out the iPad app, and everyone went, "Oh, this is going to be amazing." And then, actually, it wasn't quite the same doing it on a tiny little screen, with a finger. So, it's the kind of, it's going the opposite way around, isn't it? Instead of starting with a physical thing, making it into a tiny app, it's basically taking software and making it into something visceral and physical you can actually play, which makes it kind of exciting. I think probably, like you said, the double aspect is because it's for an installation thing.
Yeah, and I guess obviously if you think about most monitors you buy are 16:9, and if you can imagine, you split it in half, you've got the bit across the middle, and then you've got these little bits of screen that you're updating independently, presumably from both instruments. They must be off the same CPU, so it makes a lot of sense. I mean, I guess if you were to make this in the real world, it would be incredibly expensive because you'd have to have a very long, thin LCD to keep that kind of going, and that's just, how many would you have to make it even viable? I don't know, Mark, what do you think? You agree there, Mark? I mean, there is something about the physicality of something like this, even though, it's not something we've not seen already elsewhere in miniature form.
I'm trying to replicate it on the iPhone here. I've got this thing called Curtis that I'm sure works in almost exactly the same way, except I can't remember how to use it.
Maybe you've had a massive
do you know
magnifying...
what's clever about it? It's the fact that you've got that knob that opens the window to set the width of the thing that you're... I know what else it reminds me of. Time Freezer. It's almost identical to that thing, that VST plugin, Time Freezer, by Marc Linked, I think his name is. I might have that slightly wrong. Linked. He's.
Let me see if I can...
but anyway, yes, it's almost the same as that. Because there's a window which you kind of choose how much of the sound sampler. You're going to. What's
hold
that?
on.
Sampler.
Sampler, yeah, very similar to Sampler as well.
Yeah.
This one's called Curtis, which is has that window in the middle. And you can, but I like the idea you've got the knob in the middle, you grab the knob and you can adjust the size of that window. And then you've got the slider as part of that thing as well. So you can slide along and choose whereabouts in the sample you're going to be. Just looking at the physicality of being able to grab that thing and slide it back and forth, it's just like, whoa, okay. So that suddenly makes it a very tactile thing to use. And it changes the relationship with it rather than trying to kind of fiddle around with it on a screen or doing it with a mouse or whatever. I love it. I want one. Where can I get one,
Yeah. I wonder how much it would be to make. I mean, I don't know what they're probably using. I mean, it's probably just Arduino or something, like a PIC controller or something. I don't know. Diego, have you experimented with? I mean, because you create physical instruments a lot of the time. Are you into electronics in any way? Would you understand how maybe this happened, or is this something that is out of bounds for you, generally speaking?
Well, I don't know the specifics of this one, but it doesn't matter how big it is. It's a computer, so there could be a tiny little box underneath. Just connected to a large display and to the knobs. But the whole thing could be actually run from an iPad, maybe with a custom interface. You never know. I don't specifically build these things because I don't do coding, so I don't know how to code my own apps. But what you see in the front is not always what goes on behind the scenes.
Yeah, exactly.
I would just like to imagine a Raspberry Pi 2 or something like that doing the work, because it would have an HDMI output and it could drive a bit. And obviously the graphic. What's nice about those graphics, they use that kind of SoundCloud bar representation of the waveforms in place as well, which I think is a really nice kind of simplistic way of looking at things, and just for the amplitude and frequency. I love it. I don't know if there are any plans at all for this to go into production. I do know that... Sorry, go.
What's kind of nuts is that they've got like this whole thing. They're running this whole campaign that everybody knows about this thing. And you read through the whole thing, and then there's this little bit at the bottom sort of saying, if you want us to produce any of your music, give us a call. And it's like, hang on, that's the wrong call to action for this. What you should be saying is, if you want one of these, come to our Kickstarter or send us some money to develop it or whatever, because I think everybody who sees it goes like, wow, I want one of them.
Yeah.
I mean, if it was running on a Raspberry Pi, if they could even sell you the basic, the basic components to make one as a Kickstarter, so that the shipping wouldn't be too difficult, then I'm sure they'd sell loads of them. In the same way that those stick-on faders that you stick on the iPad that I bought.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I think it was IK Multimedia or someone was selling those. It's just like, simple solution to a problem we've all got. You just kind of, create a whole load of them. And
I mean, couldn't you? Essentially, couldn't you make a desktop box which has the slider in it and the processor, which you just connect to a screen?
Yeah,
so you've got
exactly.
So without the cost, without the the cumbersome thing of having to deal with whatever type screen, you could just then connect it to whatever screen you wanted with an HDMI or whatever.
Oh, that's true. Well, maybe that's.
I bought.
Sorry.
Oh,
Go,
sorry.
Go.
I bought the cumbersome thing off eBay recently for 99p. I've bought this huge, great big old wooden organ, which has got the key bed in it, and it's got plenty of space inside for something like a Raspberry Pi, which I'm thinking about putting in there. But it's essentially anybody could go and buy an organ off eBay for 99p because nobody wants them anymore. And then you've got like the key bed, and you start putting stuff inside it, and kind of if they could make it so it retrofitted.
That's a good idea.
Like that.
The chat room says, actually, Wookie in the chat room says, looks like it was coded in Super Collider, which I'm not sure how you would tell that, but maybe that's entirely possible. I suppose the other possibility is it's got an absolutely massive computer linked to it, so it could be so fluid. I mean, because, for whatever reason, sometimes it's easier to code things inefficiently with lots of resources than try and squeeze it down into something super tiny and make it efficient. I mean, after all, why would you need to make it efficient if it's an installation sort of art piece that just works, I suppose. But great bit of inventivity there, and we'll definitely keep an eye on it. I know that Marc Doty, who many people don't know, he sent an email in saying he really wants to get his hands on this because he is a complete, for all the fact that he's Mr. Analog, he's also really into samplers and has been for years and years and years, and does all that, used to do all of those kind of things. I think he said it was on an Ensoniq EPS. I forget what the actual name of this, but he said he's going to try and get hold of one and see if he can demo it, because I think it obviously really appeals to him. But great fun thing. If you want to find out more, I've got the website here. You can, it's Collidoscope.io, and I'm presuming there will be information as to what you might. Yeah, it doesn't really kind of say what they'll do, but you can contact the Collidoscope team. So there may well be stuff coming. It'll be good. I mean, it's the sort of thing that as people do, I mean, we've seen it before where people release something and it just creates a buzz, and then their services are hired, or, it's like they could do other things based on their creativity for something like that. And as I'm sure, Diego, you must have found in the past with yourself, when you release a video of one of your fantastic instruments and your creativity shines through and people go, hey, we've got a gig, do you want to do it? I mean, I guess that's the way it works a lot of the time, right?
Yeah. I mean, sometimes people ask if they can buy the Basso Forte was one that a lot of people wanted, and I was trying to explain people that this is not an instrument that can be played in a traditional way. It's actually a random thing. You press a key and it makes a note, and then the next note can be, it's not even a half tone. It's microtonal in a stupid way. So I'm trying to explain, this is an ugly looking thing that happens to make an interesting sound. You don't want it. You can build your own if you want.
I imagine the biggest challenge would actually be making a case to ship it in, because that was
Yeah. I only have a case for the Lumino piano, and the reason why it's because I built a Lumino piano inside those trunks that you use to carry clothes around when you go to college.
Oh,
just
yeah.
a big. Yeah. So I use the bottom of it, and so the size is already a fit for that box. And the only reason why I need it's because of the light bulbs. Otherwise, I wouldn't really care. I'm not planning to go around and do live shows with.
Geez, yeah. Can you imagine that? Yeah, Diego, we'd like you to tour with all your instruments. Can you imagine the casing job?
They ask me. I receive emails sometimes. Hey, would you like to come over at this college or this school? Maybe you can bring some of your custom instruments. Sure. I mean, I can put them in my bag. Like.
Yeah,
it's not so easy.
Not so easy. No, I guess logistics are not something that all people are always strong on. But anyway, this leads very nicely into our next topic, which is your product. Which, if I press, we can start with the iconic image, assuming this plays. Doesn't seem to want to today. Of the squirrel nibbling walnuts. How did you get so close?
You might think that you're about to watch a documentary about urban wildlife. But that's not the
every
case.
day.
This is an introduction to rhythmic convolutions too.
And basically, you give them a little bit of walnuts every day, and then they know that they can come. And then one day you try to put in a microphone. Then the next day you try to go closer and see if you can. At the very end, it was a moment when the squirrel actually rubbed his head over the lavalier mic, because I think he liked it.
Wow.
Yeah, because some of them are kind of shy, but some others they just love to play, and so when they know you, they know that you're not going to harm them. They get closer, and the one that you see in the video is the one that basically allowed me to get really, really close with the iPhone. I was like this close,
Wow.
and the mic. I had the microphone underneath. You can't see it because it was too close. But yeah, that was just an idea because I didn't really plan it that way. But then I realized, they make an interesting sound and it's rhythmic. So maybe it can become one of the new impulse responses.
That's interesting. I'm going to play a little bit more because
Yeah.
that was so interesting, but I had to. Right, so let me just. I just got to find my mouse.
You might think that you're up or down.
So basically, what you've done is created. This is the new impulse response library. There's 200
impulse responses made.
Impulse responses.
I create my rhythmic impulse responses by recording a lot of different things, including musical contraptions, machines, devices, sounds made by animals, toys, objects, and different random events that have an interesting tonal or rhythmic quality. But that's just the beginning, because what really makes a difference is how I later transform those recordings into rhythmic impulse responses. There's a lot of tweaking and testing involved. For each source I record, I make dozens of impulse responses to get a few finalized ones that I really like, because the key is to create a certain controlled randomness without losing the sonic texture of the original source. Now, let me give you an idea of how this works when applied on a synth sound. Just a dry sound. And here's the processing from one of the Squirrel impulse responses. Take a look at the size parameter. This parameter transposes the impulse response up or down, which in return allows to change the speed of the rhythmic accents.
That's fascinating. I could watch the whole of it all over again, but I heartily recommend that people go to check out your impulse responses, diegostocco.com. Oh, that's
Sorry,
the cat.
it's my cat.
I thought you were just. I thought you were just. Your attention had been grabbed by yet another potential impulse response.
My cat came in, and it's like the world stops. You know how cats are.
Yeah, I know. So we've seen this kind of processing before. Impulse responses are generally used to sample spaces, right? So you have,
Right.
You find maybe a great space, and that, as we know, AudioEase and various other companies create, sample some of the world's most interesting spaces to do and deliver them as impulse responses. But the notion of doing rhythmic ones, I know that some of our guests have definitely done this before. I mean, is this something that you just recently discovered, or you just thought you really wanted to focus on this for this particular project?
Well, I've been working with the non-reverbs inside convolution for a long time. I think it's been at least 10 years. I was doing drones, soundscapes, and all kind of stuff. But then one day, I noticed that when you load a certain impulse response that has a shape inside, okay, because usually input responses they look like a spark of noise, so they're like a cone of noise that goes down, and that's it. So I loaded that, and then I was using drums, and I noticed the accents, the rhythmic accents, and I thought, well, maybe I can expand this into something bigger, more articulated, and so I tried to load different materials. And that was the idea for Rhythmic Convolutions 1 that I released last year.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I took some time. I had other things to do. I was working on Omnisphere. And just recently I said, you know what, it's time to do Rhythmic Convolutions 2. I had some new ideas for new sources. And I built also some musical contraptions that, I thought they would make an interesting sound. And so that's how it came together.
It's really interesting. I mean, just the process. Perhaps some of our guests, our panelists, our listeners might be slightly confused as to what this actually is. I mean, because essentially, when you're making reverbs, convolution reverbs essentially take a sample of a space via an impulse, whether it's a hand clap, pistol shot, what have you, and then that is then applied to an additional signal. So it's like a reverb. It creates a reverb space that in a convolution reverb plugin or device you can then drop that in effectively, and you get to use the space with certain parameters you can adjust. By using rhythmic or unusual sound sources for impulses, you can apply that, and that's what creates these very odd sounds. Will these work in pretty much any convolution plugin? I mean, is there a standard convolution impulse response file that you can drop anywhere, or do you have to provide different formats?
A lot of convolution engines plugins out there, they use regular audio files. They can be WAV files, AFF, and that's the format that I'm using. I think there are a few convolution that only use a specific format, but I would recommend using one that has a size control, because that allows to change the transposition of the impulse response, and by changing that, you're changing the tempo of the accents. At this point, this is kind of an unusual way of using convolution, because there isn't a dedicated convolution engine for rhythms.
Right.
All of them are for reverbs mainly, and so this is an unusual way of using them, and you got to work around with what you have in the engine. The one that I use the most are Convolution Reverb Pro in Ableton Live, which is a Max for Live plugin that is very powerful. And if I am in Pro Tools, I use Native Instruments Reflector that has similar controls, the size and the EQ and all of that. I didn't try others. I mean, I think Altiverb can do that too.
Right.
The size.
That's
thing.
the Audio Ease one that, yeah. Audio Ease, no, it sounds like there might be a challenge for one of our show sponsors, perhaps, to create a rhythmic convolution engine there somewhere along the lines. I think we know of a company who are capable of such magical audio stuff. Mark, I know that you've done some stuff with rhythmic convolution as well, haven't you? I mean, because Logic obviously has what's it called? Is it Space Designer? Does that take regular WAV files as well?
Space Designer is a convolution reverb, yes. And it definitely takes AIF files. I can't remember if it takes WAVs or not. I think you can pretty much export anything. I think you can export anything that you record back into it. But it also, you can also collect impulse responses from spaces using their audio impulse response utility, which is built into the latest version of GarageBand. If you know how to open the contents of the app, the impulse response utility app lives inside that.
Okay.
What I was going to say about impulse responses is even I'll correct my own grammar, that a reverb is a dense body of delay reflections. So a reverb tends to happen in a very small, relatively small space. Like if I go and stand out in the open and there's buildings around me and I clap my hands, I get echoes back from all the buildings, and each of those echoes comes back at a different time. So any natural space, any natural large space, has its own inherent rhythmic kind of I can't think of the word, motion.
Yeah.
So if I stand and clap, I'll hear coming back from everywhere. So an impulse response is a rhythm anyway. It's just that the impulse reverb, the convolution reverbs that we use have all been designed for reverb, and if and it's all set in milliseconds. But if we apply, in the same way we've applied
tempo stuff,
we've applied like 1/64th and 1/16th and beat variations to LFOs, and we've applied them to envelopes, and we've applied them to just about anything else. So it must be fairly simple for somebody to code that, and if somebody did, I would be very interested in using it, because it would make it would make sense of a lot of things for me.
Yeah. Robbie, I know you use convolution, as one of your sort of tools in just general production stuff. I mean, this sounds like kind of an interesting concept to explore a little bit further. I mean, is this something that do you use it a lot? I mean, because I guess, do certain impulse responses have different frequency responses depending on what the impulse content has as well?
I quite often do this as well. I record something really off the wall and I put it in as an impulse response, quite often in Space Designer in Logic, which incidentally I came unstuck with this week, because I went to reverse some sounds in Space Designer only to find that the latest version of Logic has broken the reverse function.
Oh no.
So you can't reverse anything at the moment in there, which is a bit of a gutting thing. So if anyone's listening from Apple and Logic, fix it. Anyway, but I do this all the time. I mean, I like Diego said, I'm all about interesting rhythms and building up interesting loops, and this is one of the things I use all the time. Probably not in quite as a scientific way as he does, but I happy accidents more for me.
Right. Okay.
Doing it as opposed to setting out to design rhythmic stuff. But yeah.
Mark, you have your hand up.
I put my hand up to interrupt this. Oh, how very good of me. So the other thing is that if you're standing in a natural space, in a big natural space, and I clap my hands, the echo off that building over there is completely different sounding to the echo off that building over there and the echo off that building over there. So in the same way that Match EQ can take the EQ curve of an EQ and match it to another one, you can use impulse responses to match the EQ of one thing to another thing. So the song I sent you the other day, I used an impulse response to match the EQ of the Stranglers' bass sound, and then made my sampler sound like Jean-Jacques Bonnel, enough that you spotted it.
I think Diego wants to come back in here. It sounds like an incredibly dense sort of science, because I mean, like you say, with multi-dimensional impulse responses, it starts to get kind of complicated.
Okay, the problem with convolution processing is that when you listen to the impulse response and you listen to the dry sound, you cannot think, okay, these two combined will sound this way, because it doesn't work that way. It's a multiplication of signals over time. So the impulse responses have to be equalized in a certain specific way to sound good with a large number of sources. And the equalization of those impulse responses is not the equalization that you would use if you would just use that sound by itself, because it doesn't translate as it is.
Right, I see.
And that's the tricky part of rhythmic convolution, because you think, oh, okay, I'm going to do, and then I'm going to use it as an impulse response. Yes, you can, but that doesn't mean it will sound good.
Right.
because it doesn't translate so in a linear way. It's not linear. It's a multiplication. And so there are sources that trigger a certain resonant peak. You have to prevent that from happening. And how do you do that? Well, you do that by doing hundreds of these, testing them. Because, when I see people saying, well, I can do my own rhythmic impulse responses. Well, you definitely can. I mean, I'm actually telling you how to do it. I'm showing you in my video the basic principle behind it. But it will take you some time.
Right.
It will take you some time to get it done right, and also musically right, because some things don't translate that well.
So I've just got one question as well. I mean, so when you say you're taking something like a squirrel eating a walnut, I mean, the ones intuitively would think that would have a very small sonic imprint. So, you put something with lots of bottom end in it, it's not really going to be affected. Is that so? That's not the case. You can actually affect multiple frequencies. It really does. It's not about the source. It's about what you do.
It's about the combination of both, because when you are processing a kick drum through an impulse response of a squirrel, the squirrel doesn't really have anything below 500 hertz, It's more like, and yet you will still the kick drum will still come out rhythmically processed,
Right.
because however convolution works, and this is not the same in because every engine works a little differently. It's like samplers, they all work with the same principle, but they all sound different.
Yeah.
So it's the same idea. So basically, when you have an impulse response triggering something, for some reason, the low frequencies will always come out emphasized.
Huh.
Much more than
I
the
can
high end.
explain that.
That's really interesting. I mean, there are just so many show titles coming out of this conversation. Bass drum through
I
a
know
squirrel.
why that is.
The
reason-
Hold on a sec.
I was
Sorry.
just thinking, if there were aliens listening in to various transmissions around the world, they would home in on that line.
Sorry, Mark. Yeah, carry on.
So the reason why that happens is because the impulse response itself, it is the difference between what real white noise would sound like in that space and the EQ of that space if applied to white noise. So the Squirrel might have its own EQ curve, but the convolution engine will look at the Squirrel and it will compare it to pure white noise, and then it will do it on a time slice, sample by sample basis to try and recreate the reverb of that space, because that's what it's trying to do. It's trying to recreate a reverb. So if the Squirrel has a very steep EQ curve, if it's a long way away from white noise and the bottom end is a long way away from white noise, then it'll emphasize the bottom end, or it will emphasize anything that's very different to what it would expect to see. That's why you get that sweep, because the sweep that you hear, that kind of boom thing, is basically every single frequency in the spectrum of white noise, but then stretched out.
Right.
So white noise is all of them playing all at the same time, and that sweep curve is all of them stretched out over a 45-second sweep. And the reverb's looking for that in slices. It's going like, in the first millisecond, what happens? Oh, and the next bit, and
I see what you mean. We probably shouldn't dwell too long on the science of it. The point is, well, just 1 second. The point.
I've got one last. Yeah.
The point is that you can basically this is out now, right, Diego? It's 200 impulse responses.
Yeah, and the basic idea is you don't have to really worry much about how convolution works mathematically, because they just sound nice.
Asperger's.
They work musically in a way that makes sense, and whatever EQ carving, whatever all the kind of stuff that I did it so that they sound good, and that's the idea.
So where's the best place that people can get a hold of this convolution set?
Well, online, when you search for Rhythmic Convolutions 2, it will lead you to a page where you can just purchase them online, and it's a very simple process. It downloads a folder. If you're using Convolution Reverb Pro, you drag one impulse response into the convolution reverb, and the whole folder will appear. Same thing with the Native Instruments Reflector. You select one impulse response, and the whole folder will become available.
All right, so they're intelligently marked. That's great.
So, I'm not interrupting. So there's another thing to know here then, and that is that Native Instruments Contact has a convolution reverb built into it. So if you don't think that you've got a convolution reverb and you've got Contact, you probably do have one. Or I think, does Omnisphere have a convolution reverb built into it, Robbie?
Yes. But
I know, and UVI Falcon and Mac 5 both have convolution reverbs where you can load impulse responses. So you don't necessarily need to have Space Designer or Waves IR or the Audio Ease thing, or even Max for Live if you've only got a very basic version of Ableton. If you've got Contact, you're there already.
Right. So there we go, Diego, and pretty much anything with lots of things have it in, so you can use it. That's really so. How long did this process take, do you think? I mean, have you been working on this for specifically? Do you have to get in the zone and then you're kind of there, or can you only do a certain amount of it at a time because it's so intensive, or how does it work?
the way I do things is that I kind of collect sources for a very long time, because if you try to come up with a lot of ideas in a short amount of time, it doesn't work for me. So I just experience something one day, I hear something, go, oh, that's nice, I record it, and then I put it in a folder.
Right.
And then when I start to have a certain amount of things, a certain amount of sources, I think, okay, now it's time to take seriously this project, and complete it and make it happen. So at that point, I take everything that I recorded, I start editing it, I record new things, and I start editing. And then when I have, I mean, the final product is 200 impulse responses, but I think I made about 1,100.
Wow.
Yeah, because
Wow.
there are a lot of things that are similar, but they don't sound quite the same. Again, because it's the magic of whatever is going on inside convolution. You listen to the same files, you go, they sound the same to me, and then you process a loop inside of it, and they don't sound the same.
No.
Well, thank you very much for that. What we're going to do is I'm now going to we're going to have a word from our sponsor. No, I think because we've spent quite a long time on this, so I think what I'm going to do is we'll move on to another subject. But before we do, we're going to go have a word from our sponsor.
Okay.
Ozone 7, of course, from Isotope.
Full professional
The
sounding
go-to
tracks with
mastering
critically
suite,
acclaimed
pretty
mastering
much
tools
across
in
the board.
Ozone and Ozone Advanced. Now, the latest Isotope innovations in Ozone 7 bring modern and vintage processing to the forefront of the music production experience. Updated for Ozone 7, Ozone's highly regarded maximizer features a brand new frequency-specific IRC4 algorithm that delivers transparent mixes with less pumping and distortion. Use it to smooth out an unwieldy mix, or tame the kick drum peaks without affecting the vocals. The Dynamic EQ, now in both the advanced and standard versions of Ozone, lives and breathes with your audio, giving you more effective control over your sound without coloring your entire mix. Harness the precision of an equalizer and the musical ballistics of a compressor in one integrated processor.
So if you want to check out Isotope Ozone, go to isotope.com/ozone. And of course, we do have a competition. From last week, we asked you to tweet out the hashtag Mastering Suite and the hashtag Ozone7 to @SonicState and @Isotope Inc. And we have a winner. The winner is a chap called Lewis Ling with 2 G's on the end. His Twitter handle is @Lewis, LOUISLINGG. So, Lewis, if you're watching, then please do get in touch, or if you're listening via MP3, get in touch, and we will get the Isotope Ferry to drop off a copy of Ozone 7 into your inbox. We've also got another competition. They're giving it away again this week. They're so generous. So this time we want you to tweet the hashtag MixDoctor and the hashtag Ozone7 to @SonicState and @Isotope Inc. So once again, we do thank Isotope for their sponsorship of the show, and very much appreciate it. So do enter the competition. There's a very good chance you could win something. Right, so let's just get on some other news now. I think the one thing that's been quite interesting, let's see if I've got this. This is more in the sort of synth world. This is now the news that Roland have finally released a Eurorack case. As you know, they brought out their System 500 and also the IRA effects range, and now they brought out the one of the things that was an issue with it was it required quite a lot of power. So some of the lower end Eurorack cases just didn't provide enough ampage to drive them. So in this one, it provides plenty you could fill it with the System 1M IRA stuff, and also the System 1M, which is the full ACB voice in rack format, 84 HP Euro case, and it can do a 2,000 milliamp power supply as well. We don't have any pricing of it yet, but this is kind of interesting. Oh, have you got some information, Robbie?
I heard it was £249.
Oh, okay. That's
How much?
249 quid.
£249.
So that's probably about $399, something like that.
Yeah.
Something like that. But this is, obviously, the more the merrier as far as I'm concerned, particularly if it can make all things to play. But one thing that this rose up to me was a bit of a question, which perhaps something that you might be able to answer, Robbie. Obviously, the Eurorack format is pretty much responsible for this kind of the uprise of the whole modular system, because we've got a formalised small format where modules are affordable. I'm just wondering, though, whether there might be moves afoot for something that might be more Eurorack 2, something that had other, because obviously the thing about the Eurorack format is the power is standardized, and I think on some of them you get, the Dopefor ones, you get the CV and gate run along the rails as well. So if you've got a module that will talk this, it will actually allow you to not have to patch those in, and they kind of have the common bus. So what I was wondering was, have you got any thoughts about what might constitute a good Eurorack 2 kind of format? If there's something you'd like to see in there that perhaps they could consider?
I still think there's still an element with Eurorack, having gone into it totally, new a couple of years ago, where you feel a little bit insecure when you first start, because you have to check all your modules that the plus and minus, is the same way round, and whether you get all your ribbon cables in the right way and all that kind of thing. And I think to some people that kind of is a bridge too far, and it kind of puts them off. I don't know, perhaps some sort of system. What I do find annoying is if I want to move modules around, I have to basically open the whole thing up and take the modules out. It'd be great if there was almost some sort of standardized system where they put some sort of physical back on modules that had a connector in the back of them, so that you could almost plug them in like Lego bricks in a way.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
System. Do you know what I mean? So you didn't have to keep going inside with ribbon cables. There was some sort of standardization of that.
So one edge or the other, yeah.
Yeah, you could just go pop them in, move them around, take them out, and all that kind of business. I know that there's such a vast difference in terms of depth with the modules and all that kind of thing. But perhaps if there was an agreement on a standardized depth for a Eurorack module, that, like I say, something could be built onto the back of Eurorack modules regardless of their actual component depth, to allow them to be like a physical plug and play system.
Yeah, I know. I think that's probably not a bad idea. I mean, I was wondering about maybe the idea of having some more busing going on. I don't know, Diego, have you, a man who spends so much time meticulising about the nature of sound, have you been bitten by the modular bug yet? I know you've got a bunch of synthesizers. Is this something? Have you been sucked into this world yet?
Not yet, and I'll tell you why. Because I just posted a video yesterday night of one of the devices that I assembled for the rhythmic impulse responses. I'm not gonna go there again, but I'm just gonna say I like the approach. I like the approach before modular became a format. I like the approach of people trying to assemble all kind of devices and make them work somehow together. Even if things don't match inside in terms of impedance and all of that. But I like that approach a little better. So I know other people that go on eBay and they buy a specific thing that is not meant to be part of a modular, but it still makes a cool sound. And whatever comes out of it, I think it's more unique because it's only you. And it might not be easier, but who cares about being easier,
It's all about discovery to a degree, yes, I suppose.
Exactly, yeah. But I like the idea, but I don't have any Eurorack stuff at the moment.
That's probably a man who who spends such a large amount of time already on sound design. There's probably not enough time in your life to get into that as well, I'd imagine.
A good idea, yes. Probably a good idea.
It's a matter of prioritizing. I know, Mark. I know you haven't joined the Eurorack cult just yet, or modular cult perhaps. But it's interesting.
I can't even see how I might. I'm afraid. I'm going to echo. Somebody called Marty has commented underneath here, and he says, "New product, an empty box for 300 quid." And I'm like, yeah. I don't get it. I like things like this. iPad does a million different things, and I can configure it to do a million different things, and it's one physical thing to carry about. Same with laptop. What did you say, Robbie?
It's no different to buying a pedal board with power and then putting pedals on it, is it? It's the similar thing. You still got to pay for that basically boring thing, but it's just the start of the journey.
But I wouldn't do that. I'd go out and buy a piece of wood from B&Q, and I'd spend 15 hours with an electric drill making it myself. And I think I echo some of Diego's comments as well. I mean, it's a little bit, it's a bit like buying Lego. Lego is cool, and you can do some things with it, and you can put it in different configurations, maybe. But I don't know. I'm more interested in going and buying organs off eBay for 99p, and then digging around in them with a soldering iron and seeing what happens. And one of the things that might happen is I might electrocute myself.
Or you might break it. Yeah.
It's exciting, you know.
That is exciting, yes.
Yeah, I'm sure you can concur, Mr. Modifying Hardware. Yes, I can understand how that would be.
Yeah.
Okay, well, for those of you perhaps are less excited, it's probably, yes, I can understand. But I suppose it shows intent, and those are the things that are kind of interesting about this. But I would like to see some expansion of the Eurorack format to enable the case or the housing to have some extra functionality outside of just case and power and what have you. That would be if it actually fulfills some form of creating or routing process or something. I think that wouldn't be a bad place to go if I'm perfectly honest. Right, I think we got another video which I'm quite keen to play. This is. That's not it at all. It's not a video. What am I talking about? I thought it was a video. This is actually a piece by a chap called, let me see if I switch that on there, by John Keston, who, there's a Red Sound thing called a Red Sound Dark Star, which is kind of 80s, 1999 synthesizer, 8-voice VA, actually quite ahead of its time, absolutely vilified by the interwebs in many ways, although there wasn't probably all that much. I'm pressing the wrong buttons here. I just want to play. Can I not play that? That's all I want to do. There we go. He's posted a load of sound demos of this, which actually sound pretty luscious, in fact, in many ways. It's an 8-voice VA, 5-part multi-timbral. Some interesting features. I mean, there were a few questionable design ideas, perhaps phonos only, no volume control, and a number of other things that were kind of quite low output, and perhaps a terrible bank of presets. All of those things that kind of lead to a kind of miss, maybe, in terms of marketing. But rather than comment on this particular synthesizer, I was just wondering if any of you had that experience where you get something new and you think, wow, this is going to be great, it's going to change everything, and then for whatever reason you either didn't connect with it or it didn't kind of fulfill your needs. And I'm not thinking of maybe something that was released yesterday, perhaps, or where the names can be protected for the innocent, to protect the innocent. But I'm just wondering if there's been anything along the line, because there have been some notorious ones. Robbie, you look like you're gagging to go there.
Yeah, I've had my fair share of things that I've been either kind of smokescreen by some amazing demo. I mean, it's not so much hardware, but quite often I bought sound libraries based on thinking I would use it for a specific job or a need or something. I particularly fallen foul of this with some orchestral libraries, thought that it was great, and then realised in the way that I was going to use it and in the way that I would arrange strings, it doesn't work as well as I would want it to. But it sounded amazing when it was on the website with somebody else who purpose did demos and arrangements for it. So, I've fallen foul of that before. There's been very few synths in my time that or things that I bought like that I've really been disappointed. I think one of the things that I really didn't get on with was I bought a V-Synth GT once, and I know that a lot of people absolutely love that synth and go mad for it, but I just could never get on with it, and I just felt very frustrated with it for a while, and then just got rid of it because I just thought, I know some people out there are making fantastic music with this, but it just doesn't, for whatever reason, fit into the way I work. And I think, everyone's fallen foul of that sometime, brother.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think my first synth was a Korg MS-10, which I thought was going to change my life. But I was listening to people like Depeche Mode and kind of really synth and Vince Clarke stuff. That was about the time when, this didn't make any of those sounds whatsoever. And I just thought, what is this? It didn't work. I know, Diego, if you're probably a careful synth buyer, I imagine.
Well, I have a personal experience that I will not go through because I don't want to talk about specific things. But there's one thing that I can say when it comes to patches. They are incredibly important because, yes, they can make or break a synth. And it's like saying, we have a bundle of ingredients that are amazing, but when you cook a meal together, they don't taste good. And I'm like, why? I mean, there's gotta be something wrong. So you either don't know how to cook them, or the ingredients are not that good. So patches, yeah, they have to be. And doing patches is not. It's not like, okay, you do this and it's gonna. You have to somehow think about where this patch is gonna be used, and what do you want to inspire with that patch? Because unless you're trying to recreate a replica of an existing instrument, when you do like an analog instrument, then in that case you have to cover the basics, okay? But when you're working on a new instrument, a new synth, a new concept, what is really new about that? How do you convey that sense into sound? And it's not easy, you know. So
Yeah.
No, that's very true. I mean, I think and I think that's possibly what I think the MS-10 probably came with, a kind of how to sound like an oboe and a clarinet and all those kind of raw waveforms. But as soon as the filter got involved, it just sort of screamed, and it wasn't really making any of the sounds that I was after.
there are many examples like that in the history of synths, where people bought a synth and they got disappointed. Sometimes it's also a cultural thing. Something works in Europe, doesn't work in the States. Or something works in Japan but doesn't work in the States.
No, I think that's true. And I think in many ways, as we know, the rise of presets that came through the sort of digital age of instruments, in many ways, probably could actually be a hindrance as well as a major plus. Because if it's got that signature sound that everybody wants to use in the current now sort of sounds, then great, people will buy it for that reason. So it becomes a marketing tool. But without that, and it's just get your hands on it and make some sounds, it's a very different experience when interacting with an instrument. I don't know, Mark, have you must have been in that situation in the past as well? I mean, where an instrument has just, you haven't connected with it, or it's just a donkey for whatever reason. There aren't that many of those.
I'm going to say everything from the late 80s till the mid 90s actually, and I'll tell you why. Okay, this isn't just some random comment either. Starting with probably the D50 actually, and the MT32, Roland suddenly lost this wonderful thing which I discovered in synthesis called a resonant filter. So the M1 didn't have a resonant filter. Everything suddenly became all sample playback based and was no longer really synthesis. I learnt synthesis on a Roland SH101, and I learned how to use an envelope, and I've got these wonderful books by Roland about how to make synthesizer sounds, how to make flutes and pianos and all that good stuff. So I figured out how to do all this stuff, and I could pretty much shape anything into anything else that I wanted it to be by changing envelopes and by using filters. And I think the filter on a synth is the most important part of the synth, and the use or misuse of the filter chips by whoever made the filter, like Curtis chips, sound different in lots of different synths. So the way they're set up gives the synth its character, not really the waveforms, very much the filter. And until computing got fast enough to model good filters, there was a period in time where I would go out and I would buy synth after synth and bring it home. So like all the Emu stuff, the Proteus series, everyone in house music was using Proteuses, and I was going, these things just sound horrible. The EPS, I think Yamaha saved the day with the SY77, but it wasn't very popular at the time. But that at least brought back
a very powerful synthesis engine, for what I remember.
Resonant filters, and all the Korg stuff. I mean, I can't remember if the original Wave Station had a resonant filter. I've kind of got an inkling that it didn't, and that now they've added it to the plugin in retrospect, as if to pretend that maybe it did in the past. And then finally, so lots of synths. I used to buy synths from Thatched Cottage, like one a month, and then I'd ring them up and go, this is really horrible. I need to send it back and change it for something else. And because, I bought lots of stuff from them, they kind of tended to go with what I said. And I did lots of exchanges over a very short period of time before I think settling on a TG500 Yamaha thing, which had a resonant filter. But this is my biggest bugbear. Look at this wonderful thing.
I remember that. That's the
Akai Synth Station 25. It's like, I no longer have an iPhone 3, and this is absolutely no use at all. So it just sits in a box at the back of my studio, and I'm like going, well, maybe I should sell it on eBay. And then I look on eBay, and they're going for like £10 or £15, and brand new, boxed and everything. But
easily done. Diego,
can I say something about in regard to the comment that Mark was making about the resonance? Well, definitely, it's a great parameter to have. But when the D50 came in, every time you hear the resonant sweep, that's analog, and that's the sound. And how many times can you continue? I mean, for how long are you going to continue making music with that specific timbre?
Yeah.
So I think when a synth introduces something new, yes, you might feel like it's missing
I
something,
don't
but you
know
got to
about
look
that.
at the bigger picture. What is this synth introducing into the narrative of making music?
yeah,
know,
I
But
would
I
agree.
think-
I would agree.
Yeah,
Hold on, I
It's
would
like
also.
they took the resonant filter is like an EQ. That's
Well,
like
yeah, that's true. But I mean, I would disagree to an extent, because I mean, for instance, I remember when I reviewed the Boomstar range, the SU Electronic Boomstar, the first thing that struck me about it was not the filter; it was the oscillator and the waves and just the girth and the charisma of just a sawtooth that had all of this massive weight to it, and you could listen to that, and with minimal filtering and just a bit of you could create, because you had such a powerful source that they do have a lot of weight. It's not just the filter is important, but I agree with you, Diego. I think it has limited use because there are many other sounds in the palette. I think
I'd just like to say, I mean, the 80s synths or whatever, I mean, that's kind of my era, really, synths. If you think of classic producers who are masters of synthesis on pop productions of the time, like David Gamson with stuff like Scritti Politti and all those kind of things, those people were masters at taking analog stuff and going, this is what analog's great for, and taking all the new things like FM with DXs and all D50s with the PCM-based stuff, and working out how to combine all those things to create interesting new textures and soundscapes that we hadn't had before. So I think all those synths, maybe, D50s didn't have resonant filters, but they all had a very important part to play in the evolution of synthesis and the way we kind of view sounds now. And when you look at modern instruments, whether it be Omnisphere or Falcon or any of these instruments that have like a massive, plethora of sounds, there's kind of references to all those things running through all those kind of sound sets. So I think they're all they all found their place, whether they've got a resonant filter or not.
Yeah, agreed.
But everything we have now is like a sampler and a synthesizer combined in a really clever way. And at the end of the 80s, the beginning of the 90s, they were marketing samplers as synthesizers with ROM instead of RAM. So they were pretending that samplers were synthesizers, and they weren't. They were good sample playback machines, and I'm not discounting that some of the sounds in there were useful. What I'm saying is that as synthesizers, they were a bit rubbish.
Yeah, I suppose the thing is, it depends on what you need from a synth. I mean, it depends on what it is that floats your boat creatively as well, doesn't it? Because there are some, I mean, as we started the program with granular synthesis, some of those sounds are not filtered, but they have, because of the frequency content that those portions of the sample have, that they could be. I mean, it may as well be because they have less top end or whatever. I mean, sweeping through a sound or whatever, it gives you an awful lot of other sonic potentials, and it's just a different way of working, I suppose.
I've really upset the chat room. I've really gone off.
Keep in mind that a certain synthesis or a certain feature in one synth that then get replicated in other synths, it's about how much people love to use that stuff, because granular synthesis has been around for a while, but how many compositions do you listen that are made just with granular synthesis?
Well, I suppose, but how would you know necessarily?
Quite a lot, actually.
but how would you know? I suppose, Joe. I mean, the point is it does, to the listener, it's sort of irrelevant what the sounds are unless you want to know how they're made. It's just that it sounds good, I suppose.
And this is something that I have to remind myself all the time. When you think about this, when you think about synths and synthesis from a sound designer perspective, I mean, you are on a whole different planet. But when you look at this thing from the musician's perspective, people that just want to play something, they want to put their hands on a keyboard and do music, it's a whole different way of thinking. And to me, this is something that when you're a sound designer, you don't see it that way most of the time, because you're focusing on creating the new thing, and nothing is new enough because you already know all about it. But when it comes to
very
music,
point.
you have to think differently, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is why the M1 was so popular, isn't it? I mean, the M1 was absolute king for a while.
Yeah.
And D50 as well, because they hit the spot. People loved it. People made music. People felt connected to this instrument. So it wasn't really a matter of resonant filter versus not resonant filters. Does this make me happy playing it? Yes. Good. I'm buying it.
Yeah, exactly. And also, I mean, the reason I bought an M1, I remember, I mean, is because it had so many signature sounds. I mean, obviously, you get the person who buys it the first time.
Eric Persing made many of those sounds, if not all of them,
Wow.
Did he?
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Well, I'm hoping to have Eric on as a Sonic Talk special interview sometime in the near future. So I will definitely ask him about all of that. It feels like we're probably at a good point to quit while we can. There's been a great show. Thank you very much for joining us, everybody. I want to say before we go, to obviously remind you to take a look at Isotope Ozone 7, and also check out the competition if you want to win Ozone 7, which is a fantastic mastering suite. Remember to tweet the hashtag MixDoctor, one word, and Ozone 7 to @SonicState and @SonicState and @Isotope Inc., and you'll be entered into the competition, which we will announce next week. But I want to say thank you very much to our guests. I'll start with you, Diego. I appreciate you getting up early and letting us pick your brains on convolution. I think that was a convolution in-depth discussion, which I think I've certainly found fascinating, and I'd love to talk about it even more, to be honest, because I still want to find out more about Squirrel, and also the fact that you have those. You've obviously developed skills of the wildlife photographer as well. It's like that thing where you train the animals so that you can then. So obviously these paths lead to a lot of unexpected destinations, right?
Exactly. Yes, it's about you enjoy the experience of doing these things, and whatever life brings in, you use it for something.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for joining us, Diego Stocca. Don't forget, go and check out his Rhythmic Convolutions 2. If you go to Diego Stocca or just search for Rhythmic Convolutions, you'll be taken to somewhere where you can buy it. It's available now. I'm sorry?
I'm going to just type the link in the chat right now so people can find it easily if they want to.
Let me put that on there we go. gum.co/FFSRC2, all capitals, in case you're listening to the audio version. Yes, thank you very much, Diego. Pleasure to have you as ever. And of course, Mr. Robbie Bronneman, I hope your cold is somehow better after having this slight diversion. Once again, we thank your client for allowing you to take the time out to talk to us. Hope he's not.
No problem. Well, I'm off to the wilds of Sweden tomorrow to do a gig. So
right,
it's -7 something there at the moment. So that's going to be.
I hope it's not outdoors.
It's on a yacht.
On a yacht, jeez.
Yes.
That sounds quite exciting.
Yeah.
A select affair then, I'd imagine.
I think so. Yeah.
Brilliant. Yeah. Well, have a great trip and enjoy the glaciers and all those other things that Sweden is famous for.
Yeah. Hopefully we'll do.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Robbie. And of course, Mark Tinley, thank you for joining us as well. Been a pleasure to have your input as well this week. Thank you.
You're very welcome. And you've inadvertently provided like a little link for me to talk about more impulse responses.
No!
So I just want to talk about a website called echothief.com, and it may be that there's an impulse response in their library from Sweden. And what it basically is a whole load of people going around capturing convolution or impulses for convolution reverbs from all over the world, and then just putting them on this website. And you've got like a Google map, and you click on a flag, you zoom in, you go to that space, and you can download the impulse response and chuck it in your convolution reverb. It's a never-ending source of fascination and amazement for me.
Oh, there we go. That's interesting.
It's
what
really
a great idea.
cool, actually.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for that, Mark. And that is it for this week. I want to say thank you to everybody in the chat room. Thanks for joining us, everybody. And thanks to our sponsors, UVI and also Isotope. That's it for this week. We'll see you next time.